today we have Miguel and Rod, partners from our DC office, and Miguel also a longtime resident of the Chicago office. It's a pleasure to have you both and to talk a little bit more about the shift that we are expecting or we're seeing in policymaking. And so more specifically, I guess one of the questions that a lot of people have is, what policy changes will Biden be able to implement now he has the Senate majority?
Areas that we think that where we will have a focus on include a discussion on healthcare and a much more robust program to combat the COVID pandemic. We're going to have a much more substantive discussion around infrastructure projects, possibly on tax reform and on sustainability.
President-elect Biden has a long personal relationship with Senator McConnell. And I would think that that's likely that we'll see a lot more cooperation, even as the Republicans and Democrats defend their own policy interests.
Thank you. Another question that a lot of people have is, what policies affecting global business can we expect to see from the Biden administration in the first 100 days? Of course, the first 100 days is a very exciting time for a new administration, and there's a lot of expectations about what this would mean for the global business landscape.
The first thing on day one is simply that there'll be a change of tone. And that change of tone and a change of approach that goes with it, outreach to allies, attempts to find common ground, even with countries with whom we don't have an allied relationship, I think will be welcomed by many and will represent a substantial change that will create opportunities where there weren't before. I think that the immediate challenge that the incoming team's going to have is to get, aside from setting that tone, is to get the key leadership, the cabinet level officers and sub-cabinet officers confirmed so that they can begin to deliver on the change of tone that the president-elect has clearly indicated. They talked about working closely with allies and even with, for example, China, trying to find opportunities for cooperation, even where there are areas of competition. But it's going to be a challenge for them, combination dealing with the top priority of COVID and the economic impacts of COVID, and dealing with getting confirmations in this context where the transition process has been dramatically slowed by the outgoing administration, compounded by the political problems that come from this recent insurrection.
To the extent that some of the initiatives are approved in Congress and new laws are passed that may have an impact on healthcare or infrastructure, as we mentioned, sustainability, perhaps worker rights, that will have a direct impact on global business in that new framework will in many ways steer many business decisions associated with supply chains. Where will the companies identify as best places to set up manufacturing operations? Where should they distribute their products? What markets might be open for them to reach those new customers? To what extent will the new supply chains have to operate with clean energy? To what extent will the supply chains insource back to North America or expand in key areas where the Biden administration might want to establish friendlier relationships? One obvious region of the world where we can see greater engagement will be UK, Europe, but also Asia Pacific, because I believe that the Biden administration will want to reinsert itself as an influential participant in the rulemaking process, as well as creating a counterbalance to what might be emerging, say, with Chinese initiatives.
in hindsight, if we knew everything we learned about, the policies and that came out in the last 4 years, and if you're a U.S. company, and I think, one of the things you would want to think about is how robust is my supply chain? What would happen if export rules on being able to sell to certain parties, global partners, suddenly change, sort of to prepare for the last 4 years. So sort of a similar question for you two. If a U.S. company were to prepare for a Biden administration, what is one thing that you think they should be focused the most? And also for, clients and companies outside of the U.S., what is one thing if you think that they need to be really thinking about and try to get ahead as much as possible?
While we may hope for a more calm international environment, I think businesses have to recognize that we are living in a world and living in a time of much more geopolitical competition. And with that geopolitical competition we're gonna find a much more uncertain environment for internationally distributed supply chains. And so to bring it to a fine point, I think that international businesses, whether based in Asia, the United States, or elsewhere, need to be looking closely about the resilience, the flexibility of their supply chains, recognizing that politics in particular countries can change, resulting in changes in the international environment.
The business community will welcome a more orderly process to rulemaking and to engagement with trade partners around the world, and will also welcome that there won't be abrupt changes or tariff impositions based on momentary situations. There's going to be much more certainty in how you can plan your resilient supply chains.